The story begins in a village where a woman is crying inside her house. She is weeping and praying while her young son sits nearby. Outside, angry voices can be heard. Curious, she goes outside and sees a group of villagers beating a woman. The woman notices that the victim is Miss Marnie. Her son recognizes Marnie too, and this saddens the mother. Marnie, looking at them, also shows sorrow on her face. It's clear there is some connection between Marnie and the mother. The villagers drag Marnie to the forest and leave her near a tree. Among the villagers is a woman holding a child. Marnie pleads with her to return her child. Despite her begging and crying, no one listens. Heartbroken, Marnie tells them that the pain she feels today will one day be felt by everyone. Then she starts laughing hysterically. The villagers cruelly hang her from the tree, and the scene ends there. The story then shifts to 2024. A woman named Rayu arrives in the village with her 2 children, Anisha, her elder daughter, and On, her younger son, who is a special needs child. Rayu has rented the house owned by the village headman, Badri. While traveling to the house, their car breaks down. Coincidentally, Badri passes by and offers them a ride. Rayu explains her situation to Badri during the ride. She has separated from her husband and is raising on her own. Her husband is originally from this village, and Rayu has come here for work and to settle some debts. Badri takes them to his mother's house, which Rayu has rented. He explains that his aging wife doesn't need such a big house anymore and that it's challenging to maintain. Meanwhile, Anisha explores the house. She notices strange old clothes hanging around and finds a cupboard in one of the rooms. She hears a noise and assumes it's her brother on playing a prank. She jokingly locks him inside and leaves. However, as they walk away, the cupboard door mysteriously closes on its own, hinting that something supernatural is at play. Later, as Badri departs, Anisha goes to her room to chat with her friend, Pop, over the phone. She tells Pop that her mother got a job in the village and has found an investor to help clear her debts. As they talk, Anisha notices something odd. A roof tile has moved slightly, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The story continues with strange events. Anisha's phone suddenly glitches, cutting off her call. Later in the evening, as she prays, she hears loud knocking sounds coming from inside the cupboard. Thinking it's On playing a prank, she tries to lock him inside. But then On walks in from outside, leaving her terrified. If he was outside, who or what was inside the cupboard? Anisha brushes it off for the moment. At dinner, On refuses to eat and points toward a wall, saying, "Feed them, give them food." Anisha looks at the wall and insists there's no one there, just a sewing machine. But when she checks the spot, she finds it empty, which unsettles her. Something strange was clearly going on, but she doesn't know what. Suddenly, On throws his food and runs away. Rayu, their mother, gets angry and scolds him harshly. From her reaction, it's clear she is either detached from On or deeply frustrated with him. Anisha steps in, promising to take care of him. The next day, Anisha and On go to the market. On the way, some boys start teasing Anisha. When she stands up to them, they try to intimidate her. A boy named Tama steps in and scares them off. Anisha thanks him and learns that Tama is the son of the village headman, Badri. After chatting for a bit, Anisha continues to the market, buys some items and jokes with the shopkeeper. She notices charms hanging in the shop, similar to the ones she saw at her house. Meanwhile, at home, Rayu finds the same charms in her house and burns them in the garbage. It feels like a mistake, but she doesn't seem to realize the significance. Later, Anisha goes to the lake and talks to her friend Pop. She mentions she hasn't joined school yet and plans to enroll next semester. Until then, she will stay home to care for On. She reveals that Rayu doesn't want to keep on with her and is planning to leave his care to their father. However, On refuses to stay away from Anisha, so the siblings are inseparable. While chatting, Anisha realizes On is missing. Frantically searching, she finds him with an eccentric woman by the lake. The woman has placed a flower crown on On's head and is playing with him. She even gives On a charm. Anisha quickly takes her brother and leaves. Back at home, evening falls, and the atmosphere in the village grows tense. Villagers are seen hurrying to take their children indoors. Something about the evening feels ominous. On plays at home when suddenly there's a knock at the door. A woman outside greets him with "Assalamu alaikum." When On looks through the peephole, he sees her standing there, knocking persistently. He gets scared and grabs Anisha as she arrives. However, something horrifying is revealed. The On at home was not real. The real On was outside, standing next to the mysterious woman, mistaking her for Anisha. On returns home on his own, and Anisha takes him to have dinner. At first, he refuses to eat, but she convinces him. During dinner, On grows upset, feeling hurt that their mother, Reu, doesn't seem to care about him or his sister. After a while, Anisha takes On to bed and reads him a storybook. The story begins with a mouse, but soon it turns dark and strange. It describes how the villagers dragged a woman to a tree in the forest and killed her. As she was dying, the woman cursed the villagers, vowing to return and make them suffer the pain of losing their children, just as she had. Anisha finds the story disturbing, especially since it was in a children's book. What she doesn't realize is that the story isn't fiction. It's based on a true event in the village. Meanwhile, Tama is at home praying when the same cursed woman appears outside his house, crying and laughing eerily. Although she eventually shows up inside his house, Tama remains unfazed, as though he has grown used to these occurrences. This makes us wonder what he knows about her and why he isn't scared. Elsewhere, Anisha is also praying when she sees a child descending from an empty roof tile. Startled, she tries to help the child, but it suddenly vanishes, leaving her deeply shaken. Even though the event is strange, she brushes it off, thinking she might be imagining things because of her unfamiliarity with the new place. Later, Anisha sees Reu sitting at the sewing machine, muttering incoherently about how her parents used to fight with her. Anisha doesn't understand her words and takes her to bed. Afterward, the sewing machine starts running on its own, suggesting that Reu might be sleepwalking, or perhaps something more mysterious is at play. The next morning, Anisha wakes to find Reu angry at On for ruining her design papers. Reu explains that she needs to send these designs to an investor today, but without printer ink, she's in trouble. Anisha calms her down and offers to go to town to buy ink. Tama agrees to accompany her since he knows the area and can help her navigate. On their way, Anisha sees the same bully boys harassing the eccentric woman they had encountered before. Anisha steps in to save the woman and then continues her journey. She eventually loses her way and ends up at the tree in the forest where the cursed woman, Marnie, had been hanged. From the tree, she hears a strange call. Before she can react, the eccentric woman appears again, scaring her. The woman returns Anisha's purse but then hits her with a stick. Tama arrives just in time to calm the woman down and send her away. He reveals that the woman's name is Irma, and she is the mad lady from the village. Anisha visits Irma's house and speaks with her mother, who reveals that Irma lost her sanity after being kidnapped by a man named Vev Gobel during her childhood. However, Anisha doesn't stay long as she needs to head to the city with Tama to buy ink. When they return, they find Ryu sitting outside the house, having been punished for playing with her laptop data. Anisha tries to console her, but Ryu refuses to come inside. Anisha goes into the house to prepare food, and outside, the same mysterious lady watches On from a distance. A courier arrives at the door, and in the chaos, On disappears. Anisha becomes frantic, searching the entire village for him. She finds Irma, who has located On but is crying silently and not speaking a word about what happened. Later, Anisha and Ryu visit Badra's house, where Badra dismisses the story of Vev Gobel as a myth unrelated to On's disappearance. However, Badri then reveals the actual story of Vev Gobel, which began 47 years ago. At that time, Badri lived with his mother, father and brother Jant in the same house as Ryu. One day, a poor but kind woman named Marnie came to their house to do small jobs, such as serving juice. She felt uneasy around Badra's father, but the reason wasn't clear. Despite her discomfort, Marnie had a good relationship with Badri and his mother. However, Jant and his friends began teasing Marnie, following her around, and eventually cornered her in the forest. There, Jant accused her of getting close to his father and demanded she get intimate with him as well. Marnie slapped Jant and threw a juice bottle at him in defiance. Enraged, Jant and his friends beat her, molested her, and taunted her, saying she could never repay her family's debt. Marnie's father had borrowed money from Jant's family but couldn't repay it. In return, Jant's father had taken advantage of Marnie, leaving her traumatized. This explained why she was uncomfortable around Badri's father. After the assault, Marnie broke mentally and began wandering the village in a daze, earning the label of crazy from the villagers. She eventually became pregnant and gave birth under the same tree in the forest on a dark night. That same night, in a fit of rage, she killed one of Jant's friends. The villagers grew wary of Marnie and accused her of murder. Badri's mother advised Marnie to give her child to someone who could care for him, but Marnie refused, blaming her family for her suffering. Despite her pleas, the villagers surrounded her, calling her filthy and accusing her of immoral behavior. Badri's mother's maid forcibly took Marnie's child away, and the other villagers restrained her. Although Marnie fought back and managed to harm a few people, she was no match for the angry crowd. They overpowered her and began tearing her clothes, humiliating and shaming her in the most horrific way. Marnie was dragged into the forest by the angry villagers, paraded through the streets in a humiliating procession. This was the same horrifying scene Anisha had witnessed earlier. Badri's mother eventually learned the truth about Marnie's tragic past, and felt heartbroken and guilty for not protecting her. Despite the guilt, it was too late. Marnie's child, who had always been weak, eventually passed away. Rayu had discovered photos of Marnie and her child in a box in their house, revealing that the woman who had been crying, "Give me my child," was Marnie herself. Badri continued explaining that after Marnie's death, a rumor, or perhaps a secret, spread throughout the village. If children were neglected or unloved, Marnie's spirit would come to take them away. Some children returned, but they came back completely mad. Irma was the last child Marnie took, and since then no child had gone missing. However, it was believed that Marnie's spirit would still come for any child who was not cared for or loved. Hearing this, Anisha grew upset. She lashed out at Rayu, accusing her of neglecting An. Anisha reminded her that An was a special child who required special care, but Rayu was more focused on her business and work. In her frustration, Anisha also brought up that Rayu's husband didn't care about her, leaving her to raise An alone. Badri intervened, urging them to stop arguing and focus on finding An. He suggested a ritual that involved going around the village 7 times, beating drums and plates, as a way to bring An back. The ritual was a tradition believed to protect people from Marnie's spirit, but Rayu had foolishly burned the protective charm that could have been used. Later, Anisha encountered Marnie's spirit and fainted. She woke up near the same tree where Marnie had been sitting. She saw An and the other missing children there with Marnie. However, when Anisha fully regained consciousness, she found herself in a hospital. She had been unconscious for 3 days, and it seemed she had been dream-walking to that place. Rayu informed her that An was still missing and apologized for not finding him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but An never returned. Anisha often went to the tree where she had seen Marnie and vented her anger at her spirit, cursing her, but it was of no use. Irma, the crazy lady, tried to comfort Anisha, but Anisha was too consumed by her grief. She threw away the protective charm, claiming it was useless since her child was gone. Anisha later met with Tama and shared her frustrations, wondering if cutting down the tree where Marnie's spirit seemed to linger might solve the problem. Tama understood her pain and tried to comfort her, leaving the story open with the possibility of finding a way to bring An back. Anisha was furious with the tree and stormed off to confront Marnie. She yelled at Marnie, demanding her to return An, even offering to go with her in exchange. As Marnie began approaching Anisha, Tama arrived just in time. He started praying fervently, and by the same night, Anisha returned home safely. Raju and Anisha were overjoyed to have on back, but Tama couldn't shake off a strange feeling. At home, Badri noticed Tama's uneasiness and questioned him about it. Tama admitted that something felt off, despite everything seemingly being resolved. Marnie was gone, On was safe, and the family was happy. Tama also shared a memory of trying to cut down the tree in the past. He explained how he had sought help from many spiritual masters who prayed over the tree. Yet, despite trying hundreds, even thousands of times, the tree remained unyielding. Instead, strange accidents occurred, claiming the lives of several people. Out of fear, everyone stopped trying to cut the tree and even avoided going near it. Meanwhile, Raju began using protective charms to keep Marnie away. She even enlisted Anisha's help to apply the charms. However, when Anisha touched one, her hand got burned, a detail Raju didn't notice. Later that evening, Anisha went to the market to buy groceries. There she purchased juice that Marnie used to make. Her accent had become eerily local, and as it got darker, the shopkeeper warned her to hurry home before Marnie came. Anisha responded with a creepy laugh and left. On her way back, she heard the sound of azan, which seemed to discomfort her. Tama observed this strange reaction. When Anisha got home, she called out for On to feed him. Raju intervened, saying she would feed On since he had just returned. Anisha, however, lashed out at her in anger. That night, Raju noticed Anisha playing with On past midnight. When Raju told her to put On to bed, Anisha gave her a chilling smile, and the door closed on its own. Disturbed, Raju knocked on the door. Moments later, Anisha appeared outside, leaving Raju confused. When she looked back inside, she saw On peacefully sleeping. Anisha quickly changed the subject, and Raju couldn't tell if what she saw was real or her imagination. The next morning, Raju woke up to Marnie's lullaby echoing in her room. She even saw Marnie for a brief moment before she disappeared. Alarmed, Raju went to check on Anisha, who was singing the same lullaby to On and calling him her child. Anisha seemed normal at first, but when Raju went to prepare breakfast, Anisha lashed out at her. She accused Raju of never caring for her children, implying she was still angry about the past. Raju apologized, but Anisha dismissed her, claiming her words were lies and that all Raju cared about was herself. Anisha declared that she wanted to stay with her children, leaving Raju deeply unsettled. There was a woman who earned her own money and disliked being controlled by men, as she had witnessed such dominance between Irma and her father since childhood. The moment she saw Irma, she felt scared, and even Anisha looked at Irma with a strange smile. Anisha's friend, Pop, soon arrived in the village to visit her. Both were thrilled to see each other. Pop was no ordinary person. She had the ability to see ghosts and sense paranormal entities. She could even fight these spirits to some extent, a gift from her guardian spirit that protected her from all dangers. This guardian had also given her a relic that helped her in battles and protection. When Pop arrived, a ghost tried to attack her, but she destroyed it using her relic, making a dramatic and powerful entrance. At home, Pop noticed something off about Anisha. Later, as they walked by the lake, Pop asked her about it. Anisha admitted that ever since On had returned, she had felt strange changes in herself. Sometimes she felt her body was empty, and other times she couldn't control it. Suddenly, On began shouting, demanding to go to his mother. When Anisha tried to calm him down, he slapped her. They returned home, and outside the house, Irma stopped Pop and kissed her hand, warning her of danger in the house. When Irma touched Pop, she saw a vision. She saw Irma being taken to another realm, where children were drugged and controlled, forced into the spirit world. Irma had somehow escaped and returned to the real world, but the ordeal had left her mentally unstable. It was clear that experiencing such horrors would confuse anyone about what was real and what wasn't. Later, Anisha went to On's room and found him talking to someone invisible, calling out, "Mother, why didn't you come with me?" Anisha tried to comfort him, but suddenly, the door locked on its own. When it opened again, Anisha had completely changed. She gave Pop a creepy smile. That evening, during dinner, Pop talked to Anisha about her childhood. From their conversation, Pop realized Anisha didn't remember much because she wasn't alone in her body. She was possessed. Meanwhile, Tama and Badri arrived at the house, and Pop shared her worries with Rayu, explaining that Anisha was possessed by Marnie. At that moment, Marnie revealed herself, laughing and taunting Pop, claiming she was too weak to face her. Marnie then attacked Pop. Hearing the commotion, Tama and the others rushed in. They tried to stop Anisha, but Marnie, through Anisha's body, fought them off. Finally, Marnie emerged from Anisha's body and launched a full-on attack. Fierce fight ensued. Although Marnie was beaten and stomped down, she kept healing herself, proving to be a formidable enemy. He cut off her hand, but she grew a new one. When he cut off her leg, it also came back. Finally, she was about to weaken him and finish him off, but Pop used her relic to vanish him completely. Afterward, Tama spoke to Pop about the relic. She explained that it was a holy and powerful object that had been in her family for generations. It had been crafted long ago and used to defeat evil in the past. Everyone thought Marnie might return, but the truth was, Marnie had never really left. She took control of Anisha again, making her lash out and say hurtful things to everyone. Pop tried to stop her using the relic, but Marnie, using Anisha's voice, manipulated Pop and pushed her away. She accused Badri of not helping her and vowed revenge against her family. Marnie also said cruel things to Tama and even bit Rayu's hand. Breaking free, Marnie attacked Badri, but Tama managed to save him. Meanwhile, Anisha had hidden in a room with Rayu and An. She came out later and started attacking them. Irma arrived and tried to fight Marnie using her Camus, but Marnie overpowered her within moments. As Rayu tried to protect An, she realized Marnie had been influencing him by giving him arbs. An began calling out for his mother, but Marnie cruelly told him she wasn't his mother. Then Marnie threw Rayu aside and tried to take An away with her. Rayu begged Marnie for mercy, saying she couldn't live without her children. Rayu tried to appeal to Marnie's emotions, saying she, too, was a mother who simply wanted to raise her children in her own way, even if the world misunderstood and punished her. Marnie seemed moved by Rayu's words and hugged her lovingly. She told Rayu that her mother wasn't weak. She had endured everything to keep the family together. Marnie placed her hand on Rayu's stomach, and Rayu, now dying, held on to Marnie and her child, An, with her last breaths. Anisha was heartbroken seeing Marnie take An away. In the next scene, Anisha, Tama, and Pop stood by Rayu's grave. Anisha promised them she would bring An back and free him from Marnie's spell. At that moment, Anisha noticed another grave nearby and learned it was the grave of Marnie's child. Pop revealed that when she touched Irma, she saw a vision of Marnie taking children to a tree and hiding them there. Anisha realized that the children weren't gone. They had been taken into Marnie's world, where she kept them under her control using arbs and hypnotism. Tama offered his support, as he wanted to uncover the full story of his family's past and their connection to Marnie. He wondered what had happened to her and why she had become so vengeful. He was also curious about the deaths or events that had led to such tragedy. The story then shifted to a post-credit scene. A child was seen near the same tree where Marnie had taken the children. Marnie appeared, hinting that the story was far from over. Many children were still missing, and with this chilling revelation, the movie ended with a sense of impending doom.